The question this year is, could Europe survive without Russian gas? The answer to this question can be found in a piece of news that has gone almost unnoticed, but it's very important. Just a day before Putin entered Ukraine, he had this meeting. Russian-Azerbaijani presidents to meet in Moscow on Tuesday. And I know many of you be thinking, what does the president of Azerbaijan have to do with this story? Well, actually, a lot. In today's video, we're going to tell you about two countries that until now are practically unknown, are likely to be talked about a lot in the future. But let's get back to the question that we said at the beginning. Can Europe really stop buying natural gas from Russia? By now I think you all know that Europe needs Russian gas to survive. More than 40% of the natural gas consumed in the entire European Union comes from Russia. And with or without war in Ukraine, everything indicates that the Kremlin wants to keep selling. In fact, at the time of making this video, with Russian tanks on the streets of Kyiv, Gazprom pipelines, we're still pumping gas to the European Union. I don't know what you're thinking right now. What economic sanctions can we put on Russia? If we keep buying gas from them, as long as he remains the main buyer, the Russian economy will continue to receive money. In other words, European politicians can continue to make speeches worthy of Churchill himself. But these are all cheap slogans if we continue to finance Putin's war, and it is precisely the hot air that has brought us to this very situation. In fact, since the war broke out, and Ukraine dependence on Russia has actually increased, and I know what some of you are thinking, let's make the sacrifice. Let's just stop buying gas from Russia if necessary. We'll spend the rest of the winter without heating, but the truth is that we use natural gas for everything: industry, agriculture, electricity production. So come on to play the martyr and say that we can live with our gas today as kind of more cheap slogans. And I think that by now, we're kind of all a bit fed up with cheap slogans, aren't we? To the real question that we're asking today is, could Europe really stop depending on Russian gas? And is there any alternative to the current European energy policy? Today, we're going to answer all of these questions. But first, many of you have asked us if there is a way to help Ukraine in this war. And the truth is that there is. The National Bank of Ukraine is accepting donations from all over the world to support the resistance and the Ukrainian armed forces. This is not an advertising blog. Nobody is paying us to say this, and it is merely informative. If you're interested, you can find the link in the description below. But now let's take a look at some history. Pact with the devil. I'm going to see it very clearly. Part of what is happening now in Ukraine is due to Germany's energy policy. I know what I just said is controversial. But the data is there. Up to the time of making this video, Germany has been blocking the shipment of armaments to Ukraine. Check this out. Germany okays weapons for Ukraine and major shift on military aid. Until Saturday, Germany had a long-standing practice of blocking lethal weapons from being sent to conflict zones. In any case, and any discussion about Russia, Germany is always the country closest to the Kremlin. And why, might you ask? Quite simply, at the end of the long road of cheap slogans is the most cynical realpolitik. Let me explain. Germany is the largest energy consumer in Europe. This makes sense if we take into account that is the largest economy in the entire European Union. The cheap slogans: Germany does not want nuclear, nor does it want coal, nor does it want oil, and green energies are not insufficient. There is no way to store energy today. Yes, it is true. There are experimental technologies for storing energy. But for the time being, they're still in the laboratory. That leaves gas, and that is why both Germany and Europe are consuming more gas than ever before. In 1990, they produced 40,000 gigawatts of power. By gas 2020, they were producing more than 94,000 gigawatts. It is true that in relative terms, gas represents a smaller percentage of the mix. But in absolute terms, Europeans are buying more and more and more gas, and Russia is their main supplier. Think of it this way. Politically speaking, Russian gas is the good, nice and cheap energy option. Good because it pollutes less than coal. Nice because it provides energy whenever we need it. And cheap because it comes from Russian pipelines, which are nearby and to have good prices. Doesn't mean that we've made a pact with the devil. Yes, but until now, who cares? We have seen demonstrations against climate change and nuclear energy, but who was demonstrating against Putin? Hardly anyone. Let's put it bluntly, prior to February 2020, to put in a war in Ukraine was something that only those of you who watch visual politics and a handful of others worried about. No one in Germany was losing elections for having a close relationship with Putin. In fact, we've all seen Raul Gonzalez playing soccer for Schalke and Gazprom, Jersey, and no one thought it was bad. And all of this explains why, instead of looking for other gas suppliers, Germany has been looking for ways to buy even more gas from Russia without it having to go through Ukraine. Unfair, yes, but then again, how many of you have heard of Nord Stream 2? And that's how we get to February 2022. What happens now? Well, check this. A debt to the devil. The first consequence of this war with Ukraine is that Nord Stream 2 has been paralyzed until further notice. This was not an easy decision for Germany. But really, there was no other choice for the time being. Russia continues to sell gas to Europe via Ukraine. The question is, until when, and under what conditions? Pay attention to what the Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of Russia Dmitry Medvedev said on Twitter. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has issued an order to halt the process of certifying the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Welcome to the brave new world where Europeans are very soon going to pay €2,000 for 1,000 cubic meters of natural gas. Dmitry Medvedev, Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of Russia. The real question is no longer whether we want to continue to depend on Russia. The question is, how do we reduce that 40% of gas we buy from Russia, and how can we do it as soon as possible? At the moment, the United States has already sent 60 liquefied natural gas tankers with liquefied natural gas Qatar and said that we're willing to sell some gas if Russia cuts off some supplies. You're probably thinking, well, problem solve them? Well, not at all, really. Firstly, it's hard to imagine that the United States or Qatar could supply all the gas that comes from Russia. Liquefied natural gas is much more expensive than gas arriving by pipeline. If all of a sudden all the big European industries had to pay for gas at Asian prices, we would be talking about a gigantic economic crisis. And the question is, what can be done? Do we go back to building nuclear reactors? I mean, it doesn't seem very feasible. It takes almost 10 years to build a nuclear reactor, not to mention the lack of political will. Do we expect that renewable energies can be stored cheaply? I mean, I've already told you about cheap slogans. Are we going to make decisions based on the promise that one day someone will discover a new technology that will change everything? And so what are our real options? Well, check this out. New devils to make pacts with. We said at the beginning the era of cheap slogans is over, so let's call a spade a spade. Europe has no choice but to make pacts with new devils. Think of it this way. It is better to depend on several levels beyond just one. So the first devil in our story is the gentleman you see on screen. Meet Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan. I know Azerbaijan is one of those countries you realize exists mostly thanks to the Eurovision Song Contest. Believe me, he is a savage, corrupt dictatorship not without geopolitical problems. If you don't believe me, just ask the Armenians, and this is where the news story from the beginning of our video fits in. Russian Azerbaijani presidents to meet in Moscow on Tuesday. This meeting took place 2 days before the invasion of Ukraine, with Putin and Aliyev have declared eternal love, military cooperation and understanding of all kinds. The question is Azerbaijan really Russia's best ally? Well, the truth is, but no, it is not. First of all, they compete with Moscow for selling gas, but not only that, Azerbaijan's main supporter is Turkey, a NATO member since 1952 and the historical antagonist of Russia. Besides being famous for caviar, Azerbaijan is blessed with one of the largest natural gas fields in the world. The famous shot in these fields in the middle of the Caspian Sea. What's more, as of 2020 Azerbaijan has been selling natural gas to Europe. Take a look at this map. Here you can see how gas travels from the Caspian Sea to southern Italy. Construction started in May 2016 and was completed in November 2020. In total, 4 years at the time, this pipeline generated a lot of controversy, and yes, Russian propaganda was involved to the maximum, and Italy, they even got the Five-Star Movement, the trending political party at the time, on their site, but nothing that transcended public opinion. In fact, we all seem to put what winning the soccer league with his team Atletico de Madrid wearing the shirt of Azerbaijan, the land of fire. No one ever protested. Well, thanks to this, people in Europe can further diversify supply today. Italy and Azerbaijan plan to raise Trans-Adriatic pipeline gas deliveries. And at this point, you're probably thinking, well, I'll move. Are we really going to replace one terrible dictator with another? Are we going to give up being dependent on Russia to become dependent on Azerbaijan? Well, no, relax, because in the select club of dictators with natural resources, there is a new player, someone no one expected, and believe me, I'm sure no one saw this coming. Meet Turkmenistan. This country doesn't even participate in Eurovision. If you're familiar with it, it's maybe because of a video we made on Visualpolitik that seems more like a humorous monologue than anything else. In fact, it's a video that has a lot of views purely because it's so terrible. That is even funny. The dictator of this country is called Gurbanguly Berdimuhamed Jibhama, no doubt the name's going up here on the screen. He is also known by his oppressed people as aka Duck. Well, Mr. Architect is the comet version of Kim Jong-un. To give you an idea, he had a 68 foot as a 21